Good afternoon. My name is Justin Terrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center. Thank you. Are my tints on? Can you see my eyes, Montez? Okay, good. Thank you for being with us for this closing plenary for the 2023 Reimagining Justice Conference. Who's been to all 3 sessions so far? Yeah, how's it going? Good, good, all right. Well, so the mission of the Minnesota Justice Research Center is to transform the criminal legal system. That is, we believe that the only response to a post-George Floyd world is to change everything, to refuse to operate from a position of fear, and to choose to center humanity. We want a justice system that is fair, that is equitable, that it holds people accountable, which you could argue today it does not. And we want a system that seeks restoration. That is, we know that government's not great at making people whole, but we do know that we need to try to create more resources for people to feel whole and safe in their communities. And that's the conversation. And so today, as we close out the 2023 conference, I'm super excited and humbled about the conversation that we're gonna have today. We have folks on this panel today like Cedrick Frazier, who has been a champion and a giant at the legislature on all these issues. We have folks like Choi, who has been a pioneer in Ramsey County, pushing restorative justice, and it's been great to get to know your staff through oh my goodness, I'm gonna mess this project's name up, but we are evaluating the responses to sexual violence investigations with Ramsey County, and your team is amazing and dedicated to making that process better. We have Mayor Melvin Carter, who I'll introduce in a moment. The brother frankly needs no introduction. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is here. Secret, when the Lieutenant Governor was at Wellstone, it was literally the first organizing training I ever took. And what can I say about my good friend Angela Davis, who is just amazing, and blessings to you and your family. Thank you for just deeply engaging in these topics. I want to just shout out our founder, Tom Johnson, who said that our work to transform the criminal legal system needs to be based on values, identifying more shared values that brings people together across differences so that we can actually build a justice system, and not just a system that is here to administer and actionize the laws that we pass. So welcome to that conversation. You've been in the conversation, and I'm going to thank our sponsors, right, Jermaine? Thank you. I want to thank our sponsors. And I don't have a list in front of me, but thank you especially to Thomson Reuters, our founding sponsor, who I know there's some Thomson Reuters folks here, and they were here last night. I want to thank Target Corporation. If anyone knows, that was the first campaign I ran was on Target Corporation, so it's great to be working with them in a new capacity. Polad Foundation, who came in and supported this work this week, and several other sponsors, including the Center for Humanities and the support that we've gotten from Kevin Lindsay. Mayor Carter, when I was an organizer, a baby organizer, I came and sat down with you, bro. I was working on the Ban the Box campaign, and St. Paul was one of the first bodies in the state of Minnesota to take action on Ban the Box. And we didn't have to occupy your office. You were a city council member at the time. We didn't have to do none of that. You just championed that legislation, and you helped us support it at the Capitol as well. So I've always considered you a friend and a mentor, and one of St. Paul's most proudest sons, right? So thank you for all your work and your leadership. I look forward to the work you're doing with the new city council, with our good friends, Anika Bowie and others, and also the work that you've done on Returning Home St. Paul, which is a housing program for folks in St. Paul who are formerly incarcerated, getting supportive housing and market rate housing. Our report's coming out about that soon. The restorative justice work that you're doing, and Project Peace and the Office of Neighborhood Violence Prevention. This is why we've invited Mayor Carter to speak today, so that he can welcome you to his city, but also just recognize the work that you've been doing. So thank you, Mayor Carter, and welcome to the stage.
Justin, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Do me a favor and give a big round of applause to Justin. You've been... You know, a couple of years ago, we went through hell right here in the Twin Cities. A couple of years ago, the eyes of the nation, the eyes of the world, the eyes of CNN, the eyes of every media reporter on the planet was suddenly focused on the Twin Cities metro area around this exact topic that we're talking about right now. What is the relationship between police officers and members of the community? What should the relationship between police officers and members of the community rightly be? And in that time, in that moment, Justin, I got a chance to do some storytelling on behalf of our region. And one of the things that struck me most profoundly as folks would ask me like what I thought the takeaways were about the murder of George Floyd, I remember telling people over and over again, I think the most important thing you have to know about the murder of George Floyd is just how fundamentally unsurprising it was in the course of American history. Sadly, of course that was going to happen. You know, I'm a part of a community of people who have watched this play out for a number of years. And as a side note, my pastor would say, let me parenthetically to just say that this conversation that we've seen play out on cell phone videos is only as new as it is because cell phone videos are new. And I like to remind all of my friends in policy-making spaces that the only logical conclusion is that the incidents that we see play out on cell phone videos is the new and improved and upgraded treatment that ends up happening because now we know that there's cell phone videos out there. So I say that all to just say, Justin, you know, and folks would ask me, you know, what are you going to do different, Mayor, now that this has happened, this horrific event has happened? And I would tell them, listen, the truth is nothing. We're not going to do anything different because this happened. And the reason is because this didn't suddenly happen. The reason is because we knew that we had to start this work a very long time ago. And I say all that just to say, Justin, to be in this space with somebody who started this work a very long time ago, to be in this space with so many of you who started this work a very long time ago. I'm not going to try to name all the names because it's all of you guys. So do me a favor, just look at the person sitting next to you and clap for them and let them know you appreciate that. I think we've been doing it wrong. And I share this with my team a lot. We, me and you, inherited a model of city building that I think is backwards and messed up. We are told when I got elected office, folks said, listen, your biggest jobs are public safety and economic development. And where public safety is concerned, all they really mean is our job is to sort of find all the bad guys in community and lock them up and get them out of the way so us good guys can go about our life. Right? And where economic development is concerned, all we mean is like, get all these local residents out of the way, get all these local businesses out of the way, and let's see if we can find some business in Memphis or Miami or better yet, Minneapolis, and we can give them some money and get them into our community. All I'm saying is the models of city building that we've inherited together are models that value place over people. The model of public safety that we've inherited says we're going to draw a circle and we're going to put some people on the edge of that circle, and their job is to just protect the people who we think are inside the circle from the people who we think are outside the circle at all costs. And it's incredible for me because I'm going to tell you this, I'm black. No, I have been all of my life. Which means I was once a 16-year-old boy, which means I was once a 17-year-old driver behind the wheel of a two-tone gray 1984 Monte Carlo, which every police officer on the planet will tell you is the most stolen car in America, pre-Kia and Hyundai. And I could spend the rest of your time here today telling you about my stories of being pulled over and knowing I wasn't speeding, of being pulled over and knowing I stopped for that stop sign, of feeling this feeling. But then at the same time, I know many of you know my father is a retired St. Paul police officer. So when we look at that circle, it's intriguing because I grew up on both sides of that line. I grew up literally on both sides. I grew up knowing what it feels like to be inside that circle, and I grew up knowing what it feels like to be outside of that circle. And so for many of the first couple of years of my administration, I would tell people, if you go through this city and ask people, and it sounds funny, but it's not, if you ask people what they don't like most about their mayor, the two most common answers you'll get is he's hired too many police officers and he hasn't hired enough police officers. Which sounds funny, but it demonstrates the gap that exists, that line creates, based on whether I perceive myself as in front or behind those officers. And so all we're talking about when we talk about reimagining public safety is we're talking about a public safety system that focuses on, get this, public safety. A public safety system that's about keeping us all safe. A couple of years ago, St. Paul, post-COVID, we saw this like big spike in violent crime across the country. In St. Paul, like many places around the country, we experienced a record number of homicides in our community. And a reporter looked at me and said, you spent all this time talking about reimagining public safety. Given that St. Paul has just experienced a record number of homicides, do you still feel like public safety should be reimagined, and why? And I said, well, yes, because we just experienced a record number of homicides in our city. But that's the psychosis. And that's one of the psychoses that I have to live, that our lieutenant governor has to live, is every day we're surrounded by people, and public safety is the most pronounced. We're surrounded by people who will tell you, and the people who will tell us the loudest, that we are dissatisfied with all of the outcomes we have ever experienced with regard to our public safety infrastructure are the exact same people who will get loudest to block us from changing our public safety infrastructure. So we have a lot to talk about. I'll get out of your way. I got to race to another event. You have an exciting thing. But I want you to know that in St. Paul, we're advancing this model that we call our Community First Public Safety Framework that starts with saying, well, actually it doesn't. It starts way before somebody calls 911. Because I tell folks a lot, I think part of our problem with public safety in America is we've mistaken public safety for emergency response. So in my house, I have a 3-year-old, right? And if you were to tell me our plan to keep her safe was to make sure that somebody goes to jail after they do something bad to her, we'd have to talk some more. Public safety is about those little plastic plugs that I put in the outlet to keep her from getting hurt. It's about those little foam thing I put on the corner of the table. It's about us figuring out what are all of the things that could befall this little child, and how do we safeguard our home. And if you show me a neighborhood where we are concerned about public safety, I'll show you a neighborhood who hasn't been invested in from a safeguarding perspective. And so our goal is to safeguard. Our goal is to right-size our responses, because we all know this. There are problems that just can't be solved with handcuffs and badges. Our goal is to make sure that we do have handcuffs and badges when there are problems that require handcuffs and badges, because we know that our community members deserve to be protected as well. So our goal is to make sure that we do have those available when we need them. And when they show up, they are someone who is helping us up and not putting their knees on our necks. And our goal is to make sure that we are constantly thinking in just the way we will in Thanksgiving. This is the last thing I say. We all have families, and many of us will celebrate. And you know who I'm talking about. You got that cousin or that brother, or that person in family that we all know, they need some help. And I tell folks all the time, I don't think a city is a stack of buildings and streets. I think a city is a family that has to take care of one another. And next week in Thanksgiving, we know that family member who needs some help, we're going to call them and make sure they show up. We're going to make sure they get some food, right? And that's what this is about, is saying instead of a system that says, you know what, if we think you're on the margins, our goal is going to be to push you further away. We're building a system that says if we think you're on the margins, our goal is to pull you in so that you can be a part of our thriving community. That's what Reimagining Public Safety is about. That's why I'm excited about your work, Justin. That's why I'm excited that you chose to be here today. And that's also why I'm excited to introduce my big sister to talk to you next, because here in Minnesota, it's so exciting. We don't have to be on an island where we're saying this stuff and shouting and shaking our fists at the clouds. We have people in positions of power who agree with this, who are righteous, who are on our side where this is concerned. And let me tell you, our next speaker is somebody I've known for 2 decades now, who I've seen speak truth to power and be in all the right spaces at all the right times, who I've been just admired for a really long time, have been inspired by every single time I hear her speak. That is my Lieutenant Governor and yours, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
Mayor Carter, everybody. Bonjour, Peggy Flanagan, Indigenous Kaz, Giji Wewadamukwe, Indigo, Guabaga, Ganikagnan Junjaba, Mangan Dame. My name is Peggy Flanagan. My English name is Peggy Flanagan. My Ojibwe name is Speaks with a Clear and Loud Voice Woman. I'm a member of the White Earth Nation, and my family is the Wolf Clan, and the role of our clan is to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And so that's why I'm so grateful to be here with all of you, because that is exactly what we are here to discuss. My big brother, Mayor Carter, big brother, laid it out, and I don't know if you see the family resemblance or not, but he laid it out. When we talk about public safety, we have to challenge what we mean. It's not simply law enforcement. It means that will someone look for me if I go missing? Will someone look for my child if she goes missing? Does someone feel safe when they're walking in their neighborhood as a Latina woman in Rochester, which is a conversation I had yesterday? Do our children have what they need to thrive? Are we investing in the first 1,000 days of their lives, like the 3-year-old that is at home with Mayor Carter? And if we're talking about the need for public safety, then that means that families have resources to put food on the table and to be stably housed. So a child tax credit that will lower child poverty by 1/3 is public safety. And that we are investing in people who are currently incarcerated and incorporating them into the conversations about how do we create a better space and a better life and a smoother process to reentry for a community to open their arms and welcome you back. That is public safety. So we are doing this work, and I am grateful for all of these men, all of these leaders who are going to be on this stage. Many of us are a little loquacious. So Angela, you have your work cut out for you. But that we are in a moment where we cannot stop. And there are folks who feel fatigue, but we cannot stop. And what is the choice? We don't have one. It's to keep going. So I'm grateful to be in this work with you. I'm grateful to Justin for your continued leadership. It is a great honor to be the first person to ever give you an organizing training. I also trained the governor, so I got a good track record, and maybe you're next. I don't know. But thank you again for being here, for your commitment to justice and the need for us to heal together. And that work is through policy, and that work is through community, and that work is through building relationships and trust with each other. Gichi Miigwech, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. Thank you so much for your Yo, how y'all feeling? Because I'm feeling my heart is overflowing, because this is such a powerful conversation and what we need to be talking about. It is my honor to bring Angela Davis to the stage. Angela, has been around for years in our community. I think 25 years of broadcasting experience. My apologies. I'm just saying. Very experienced, very skilled. I love the coverage that you've recently done on restoration of voting rights. There's a story about 2 brothers who are in the room who actually voted for the first time this year because of the bill that the governor signed this year. My guy right here. And so I'll just be brief and say thank you for always creating airtime and creating space for the voices and stories that matter to this fight, that matter to this movement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my people, please just give a round of applause for Angela Davis as we welcome to the stage.
Well, what a gift to be in the room today. This is great. And so many of the people I see in the room, folks who've been on my talk show, and I feel so fortunate that we live in a state where we have so many people who are focused on solutions. And I know that there is so much criticism of news media because so much attention is given to what is going wrong. But it is encouraging to see what is going right and to meet people who are like the people that are sitting on the stage and many of you in the audience who are jumping into the fight and getting things done. So first, a round of applause for being a part of this conference, this conversation today, for giving this your time and attention. All right, let's get to it. I want to introduce the folks who are on stage here. You just heard from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, but let me tell you a little bit more about her. Prior to serving as Lieutenant Governor, she was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives to serve her hometown of St. Louis Park and surrounding cities. She previously worked as the Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund, and that's where I first met her, and served on the Minneapolis School Board in the early 2000s. I bet that was fun.
It was an adventure for sure.
And as you heard her mention, she is a member of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe and currently the country's highest ranking Native woman elected to executive office. And thank you for being here, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. Next to her, we also have with us State Representative Cedrick Frazier. Now, he represents House District 43A, which includes New Hope and Crystal. He previously served on the New Hope City Council and worked as an attorney in the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office. He's also been the Director of Equity and Diversity for Minneapolis Public Schools. You've also hung out in some pretty fast-paced environments, right? Yes? Before heading to the legislature, Representative Frazier is the author of the Restore the Vote bill in the House that became the state law this year, giving Minnesotans with felony convictions the right to vote as soon as they are released from prison. Thanks for being here, Representative Frazier. Next to him, we have Ramsey County Attorney John Choi with us. John was sworn in as the first Korean American chief prosecutor in the country in 2011. He previously worked as the St. Paul city attorney, and since taking office, he's received national attention. He's been working really hard. He's become a state and national leader in progressive justice reform, and some of the awards that he has received sort of give you an idea of who he is. He received the 2015 Minnesota County Attorneys Association Award of Excellence for his leadership in combating sex trafficking, and the 2019 Profiles and Courage Award from the Minnesota Association of Black Lawyers for his efforts to improve prosecutor responses to officer-involved fatalities here in Minnesota. So good to have you with us, John, our Ramsey County attorney. So when I think about all of the issues out there to be tackled, all of you are in leadership positions. I want to know from you, we heard the mayor talk a little bit about this. Why is reimagining justice sort of at the top of your list of priorities when you look at all the things that need to be improved upon? Reimagining justice, why is this a priority for you? Why is this personal for you? Lieutenant Governor?
Sure. So again, I'm really grateful to be here and just humbled to be on the stage with two leaders that I really admire and respect who get incredible results for people. I think it's important to reimagine justice because there are so many folks who experience injustice every day. And in Minnesota, we have had a real commitment to the status quo and to not having conversations that are challenging around issues of justice. In fact, sometimes it's hard for us to even talk about equity, right? There are our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who have said if equity isn't contained in any bill, that they won't move it forward. That's a choice. So we are challenged to even think about equity, but we have to move towards justice. And I think that there are so many folks who do not trust the system for good reason. And as we are changing the folks who are making decisions I think that matters. As our leadership more accurately reflects the community it seeks to represent, we are getting different results. I think about Chair Frazier, I think about Chair Representative Becker-Finn as well, and people who are now in these positions. But I'll just say this. This is personal for me because my dad left home when he was 15 because there were too many mouths to feed in the house. And eventually, he ended up in Red Wing and was incarcerated. And that story is not unique. And I know what it's like to be on the other end of the phone line with my brother. You have 60 seconds left. You have 30 seconds left. And making sure that you say all the things that you need to say before that line clicks off. So that is why this is personal to me. And we have to be willing to have these conversations that challenge that status quo, where we have choice points along the way, especially when we are in moments of crisis, to be able to say, how do we pause and stop and do what is needed and necessary and not react from a place of fear, because reacting from a place of fear in policymaking is what has gotten these unjust results in the state of Minnesota.
Representative Frazier, reimagining justice, that's a powerful phrase because it implies that it's broken and needs to be completely rebuilt. How do you view this in terms of why it should be a priority?
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for sharing that. It's not broken, but it does need to be fixed. And it's not broken because the results that we're seeing in the justice system that we have, the system was designed to create these results. So my perspective, just a little bit of background. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, for any Southsiders out there. There's one Illinois person out there, close to the city. But I grew up in a community called Inglewood. And in that community, I can tell you that when they doubled down on the justice system that was in place, my community didn't feel any safer. It did not feel any safer. In that community, when they doubled down, I saw more police officers, but I didn't feel any safer in that community. And the crime rates didn't change in that community. And I can tell you what we really needed were more jobs. We needed more affordable housing. We needed more investment in our schools. Those were the things that we needed to ensure that we would have safer communities. But those things were never answered by the policymakers when I was growing up. The idea of public safety always meant, and the mayor talked about this, that idea always meant lock up the bad guys. And that always meant put more police in a place where we're seeing crime. So when my communities were being over-policed and they were getting people sucked into the system that should have never been there, it created a perpetual cycle of the violence, of the incarceration and recidivism that had all these collateral impacts. That meant it was hard for you to get a job. That meant your education was being disrupted often, which means you had poor outcomes, which means that statistically, and I always talk about the idea that statistically I'm not supposed to be sitting here in these roles with these titles having this conversation, because the way the investments didn't happen, the way the policies were framed in a way to ensure that someone that looked like me did not make it out of that community with an education, able to have a good job, able to move to Minnesota, get a bachelor's degree, get a master's degree, get a law degree, and then run for office. Statistically, the policymakers put policies in place that statistically made it impossible for things like that to happen. So me, when I think about being a part of the system and being in the system to reform our justice system, I am always focused on how do we create things, how do we create the opportunity and the possibility so that there is no exception. There's no exception, but it is a norm to see people like me be successful, to see people like me sit on stages like this and have this conversation. And hope ultimately not to have this conversation, right? But to just be able to talk about the incredible outcomes that we're having. And when I talk about this, I say this to all people because, I'm the co-chair of our Posse Caucus, our people of color and indigenous legislative members. And what I say to people is, Posse Caucus issues are Minnesotan issues. All across this state, there are folks that look like me that live in communities across this state and to look like our lieutenant governor, all across this state. But what we know, when we look at statistics, there's extreme disparities in the lives of those folks in this state. So when we lift those people up, we're lifting this entire state up. And I don't care where you're from or what your ideas are, you should be about lifting this entire state up and caring for all Minnesotans to have credible outcomes.
John, you've devoted your whole career to justice, the legal system, and so reimagining justice, what are you seeing that makes this a priority for you?
So let me start by kind of underscoring a little bit of what's been said, and Cedrick, you started it, and I want this to sit with this audience. And Angela, you started it by saying that the criminal justice system may be broken, right? And Cedrick talked about how it's not broken, but I want to underscore this. The criminal justice system is not broken. It's actually doing exactly what it's doing. It's what it's designed to do. And so that means a lot of the things that are happening within the justice system from various perspectives, those are real. And until I could really understand that, that's when I became a much better county attorney, to recognize that what it was designed to do is actually not really happening. We are not necessarily getting public safety across the board for everybody in our community. We have an overrepresentation, massive disparity in the criminal justice system. And there are just a whole bunch of assumptions and lies that are built in the criminal justice system that we have never actually explored. We believe that by watching TV, that somehow 2% of all of the cases in America, or all the cases in America are resolved in a jury trial. That's not true at all. It's only 2% of those cases. In fact, what it is, it's a plea bargaining system that exists to trying to exact out some form of accountability, and it's much like an assembly line. And we never asked ourselves whether or not that assembly line actually works. In fact, I would submit that if we actually look at those outcomes, I will tell you that the more times that someone is involved in the criminal justice system, it will beget further and deeper justice involvement. That we are not changing trajectories at all. In fact, we are just processing people so that we can put scarlet letters on people, and then if appropriate, put them in boxes or cages, and then they will be released. Nobody goes to prison for a very, very long time unless you've probably killed somebody. And again, we see the thing repeat over and over and over again. I think if we want to have a better version of safety and justice in this country and in this community, what we really need to do is, it's not about me. It's not about me as the county attorney going in a room with smart people and coming up with some ideas that would actually just create more alternatives to the current system, some off-ramps, but we keep the current system in place. If we truly want to think about a better way, it's not about me. It's about our people, our communities, and we need to make sure that the communities that have never been at the table are invited, and that we start thinking about how we could do things better, because we all want the same thing. We all want a high quality of justice, we want safety, and so that reminds me of our initiative to reimagine justice for youth, which was started back in around 2018, some of the internal conversations. And the whole premise of it was to share power with our community, to take our most impacted community, the community that has been most impacted by violence, the community that's been most impacted negatively by the justice system and the system that we have of convictions and sentencings, to put them at the front of the table and ask them, what do we need to do? And so from the course of 2019 to 2021, we did a lot of learning together. And what we found was that if you go back 10 years in the Ramsey County system, we are not that effective in terms of how we did youth justice, juvenile justice. In fact, the more times people are involved in our systems, more likely they're going to be in prison, and we have massive racial disparity. And so is there a different way? Is there a better way? And so what we have done is we've developed a new process by which we bring actually the public defender in the room to help us decide, along with impacted community perspective, about what we should do with a certain category of cases. How should we best respond? How do we address the underlying needs of the young person and the victim? How can we make that victim whole? And it's really surprising how that has really transformed the way that we are starting to look at things. And we're actually getting better outcomes, and we're actually addressing head-on the racial disparity. Before we did all of this, we had huge disparities in those who would actually be successful in diversion or some alternative. Now, when we refer to community-based restorative justice, that success rate, the disparity gap, has reduced. And a big part of that is because we're relying and working with community to be a part of that process, because we're getting those kids and families to show up. Before, what was happening is kids were failing because they never showed up.
So you have witnessed change, create change.
We're on the front precipice of it, and we're going to document it for the next 10 years. So my goal is to beat the past 10 years, pre-21, and over the next 10 years, we're going to actually produce a better version of justice and safety for all.
We know that change often brings fear. So I want to talk about the theme of this gathering is centering humanity over fear. And I want to talk about fear. I want us to talk about how you all see fear influencing how leaders make public safety policy, how people in the community view public safety, and why we should resist designing systems of justice around fear. What can you tell us about the conversations you have, the circles you move in, and the role that fear plays, Lieutenant Governor?
I think fear is a really powerful tool. And it's a really powerful tool that we have seen be at the heart of policymaking. As we look at how decision makers will get really caught up in the othering of folks, it is a way to have things be very black and white. Certain folks are in, certain folks are out, certain folks are good, certain folks are bad. And it makes it easier to get people to move, right? To vote along with you, to do things that can be pretty damaging. I think the opposite of fear is hope. And much of the work that we have tried to do, and frankly, it's stuff that we've been telling people we're going to be doing for a long time and that have been priorities, and no one should be surprised, but have been able to do that because and I'll protect your tax status, but we've had the right butts in the seats who've been making the decisions over the last few years and this year in particular. And I want to just lift up a couple of those pieces because I think it matters. I think pardon reform is a really powerful thing that we got done this session. So that means that it does not have to be a unanimous decision to ensure someone can have a pardon. It is, you just need 2 votes out of 3, and the governor has to be one of them. The Clemency Review Commission will also determine, frankly, expand the number of people who can apply for pardons. I think that brings hope, and that brings new opportunities for folks to live their lives. The Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act, which gives people a real opportunity to get back into community and make sure that they have the things that they need, like housing and training and support, and also making sure that folks know that there is a pathway to release and to reentry. And we're working on that right now. And it's historic and it's not happening anywhere else. So we got to get it right, and we have to build it the right way so that we are not creating more racial disparities as we are building this system. Restore the Vote, which Chair Frazier led on, and that people have been leading on for years and years to get us here. And it is the humanity of the people who testified and were willing to share their stories that finally got that also over the line and into position. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about here with that piece of that fear is that somehow we think keeping people disconnected from their community is a good thing when they're incarcerated. And it couldn't be further from the truth. One of the things in 2015 that we started working on at CDF that we finally got across the finish line because we had this amazing senator, Claire Umu Verbaden. Yeah, you can give it up for Claire. We have free phone calls for people who are incarcerated to stay connected with their families. And this statistic, I wanted to bring you hope and joy. I want it to be the antidote to fear is 7.4 million minutes every month since August 1st of conversations between people who are incarcerated and their families and community. And that matters. That connection matters, and that is the antidote to fear.
Representative Frazier, how have you seen fear play a role in decisions about public safety, around criminal justice? What do you see? What have you been a part of?
I think when we talk about this fear, in most cases, for most folks, it is a fear that they're going to lose something or something's going to be taken away from them. So we've got this zero-sum mythology that's out there. And what the Lieutenant Governor just went over, and thank you for going over those pieces so I don't have to go over all of them. Those are investments. And it's investments in humans. And we have this lens, and we should all have this lens about the humanity of it all, right? And John talked about most folks, when they go in, at some point, they're going to come home. They're going to come back to the community. And we should be investing in ways to ensure that when they come back to the community, I always call it creating a smooth landing path back into the community. When they re-enter the community, when they're replanted back into the community, we should be making sure we have fertile ground for them to grow into when they come back. We should be creating space so they can be successful. And I always tell this story when I was carrying the Restore the Vote bill and I had testimony. There was a pastor that came, it was a snowy Minnesota morning, and there was a pastor that came up from Red Wing, and she made it there at the last moment to testify. And at the end of her testimony, she said, "Restored people restore communities." And that will forever stick with me when I have these conversations. We should always be focused on restoring people so that when they come back, they can give back and pour back into that community. I always tell folks, accountability has its place, but then what? But then what? Because when we talk about fear, we're talking about one thing. We're talking about accountability, we're talking about punishing folks, but we're not talking about then what? What happens after that? And we have to be focused on what happens after that. Because it's better for all of us when we invest in people and create space for them to be successful when they return home.
John, you're someone who's led with courage, not had a problem with being first or doing things different. But what have you seen when it comes to fear?
Yeah, so fear is a powerful force, and it's real. And I don't want to minimize it because we're all human beings and we're always susceptible to, but we have to think about what's driving all of this. And what's driving all of this is what we see and hear on social media, in our news. And if you think about what's reported, or what people are just human beings are interested on, and it's when bad things happen, right? And so you hear about the revolving door in the criminal justice system, and this person was released, and oh my God, this horrible thing happened, and that is horrible. But what's never reported is when something actually works or is successful. And so we get just flooded with all of this negative, right? And when we let that fear overtake us, then what happens is the progress about improving the quality of justice and actually having better safety, we get confused and we get we get distracted. And I think the antidote to all of that is really all of us here in our communities having conversations with people and talking about the commonality, because I am absolutely convinced, whether you're on the left or the right, and criminal justice shouldn't be a left or a right. We all want the same thing. We want a strong sense of justice in our community that everyone feels. And that's not true today. We want all people to be safe. We don't want people to be subject to being a victim of a crime. And if you are, we want to help you. Those are values that are everywhere in the state of Minnesota. I also know that the values in the state of Minnesota are about rehabilitation, redemption, and reconciliation. Wherever you go to a place of worship, whether it's a synagogue, mosque, or a church, those are values that are that are universal to all human beings. But we don't practice it, oftentimes in the criminal justice system, because what we see and what we hear and what we are fed is the worst of all of these situations. So fear can be overcome, but it can only be overcome by all of us thinking and engaging with our neighbors and having bigger and greater conversations and making sure that everyone's perspectives are part of that table.
having conversations that promote understanding. Lieutenant Governor, I know you have to leave for another commitment, but before you go, I want to ask you about, as you look to the future, what are some of your priorities, that you hope to be able to move forward in the next legislative session or in your, remaining term as Lieutenant Governor?
Sure, I appreciate that. I think I will absolutely talk about that, but I want to honor our Commissioner, Rebecca Lucero, who is in the audience from the Department of Human Rights. She is a badass leader who is unflappable when it comes to her deep commitment to justice.
I don't see that on the website.
Yeah, I know. It's in the next draft. But, the Department of Human Rights came to a court enforceable agreement with the Minneapolis Police Department, and it was thoughtful and did in a really good way. And I think it was incredibly important to do it in a thoughtful and good way because now it's there and it's got teeth. And it is one of the tools in our toolbox that we have to heal after the murder of George Floyd. And I am grateful to you, sister. Thank you. To be very candid, what I am thinking about and what keeps me up at night is implementation of all the things that just got done in the last legislative session.
The next step.
Yeah, and,
right?
and to be real, right? Like we have to have the premier paid family and medical leave program in the country. We have to make sure that there is a 100% uptake for everyone who qualifies for the child tax credit. We have to make sure that people can easily, our undocumented brothers and sisters can easily go and get a driver's license. All these pieces are connected. And so I am ready and willing to do more that the legislature will send our way. And I want to make sure that we are doing things, that we are delivering on the promises that we already made, so we can make the case that we can continue to be bold and go big and do more, because we have generations of injustice that we are trying to undo. And I talk about this a lot as we think about turning the ship, right, of our state in a different direction after 165 years. I did the first ever round dance and feast at the Stillwater prison with members of the Native community, because they're like, come on in, and we need access to sweat, and we need access to wood, and we need access to rocks. And like that is now happening because of that human-centered connection. And so there are more policies that we can pass, but there's also just more that we can do, that we can just do because we're the ones at the table. And that, I think, is also part of what we need to do in this moment. So long story long, a lot. There's more, and I am
There's
sure,
momentum.
yeah, that there are people in this room who are going to push us to get there, and y'all should, because that's your job.
And their support. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Thank you for your participation. I'm going to slide in your seat right there, and we're going to continue talking with Ramsey County Attorney John Choi and with State Representative Cedrick Frazier. Let's talk about leadership. I would not want y'all's job, let me tell you. Leadership in public safety, leadership in justice reform. Leadership is tough, is very tough, but when we think about some of the more challenging aspects of public safety and the justice system, what makes it so hard, do you think? What makes people, retire, leave, abandon, not want to talk about it? What have you seen that sometimes breaks people who have great intention but can't stay with it to fully get it done? John?
Well, this is a really tough time for a lot of people. And I think now, too, we have to acknowledge the fact that it's a tough time for law enforcement.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's a lot of great people in law enforcement who just want to know what to do. And it's confusing for them at this time. And I think there's a lot of people that just aren't going to go into this profession anymore. Maybe that's an opportunity to figure out how best to have that better version of policing. But this work is really hard. And a big part of, I think, the way to have success is not to have the barriers and not to have the walls, but actually try to bring people together. And We've had some really hard conversations in Ramsey County about what public safety really is, what is justice, what do we need to do. We've had some public criticisms of one another, myself and the sheriff, but I stick with that relationship. Even the fact that I felt like I was wronged by him when he called me out on something that I felt like was very unfair. I know that I have to work with him. I have to work with law enforcement. And so I've been working to try to bring things together. And some of those conversations have been really productive. You know, we have a non-public safety traffic stop policy in Ramsey County, where our officers are, and it's not me telling the officers, it's the police chiefs that are participating in this project. But we've substantially reduced the number of non-public safety traffic stops, and I'm talking about the license tabs, the thing hanging from your rearview mirror, one headlight out, one brake light out, and we've reduced the racial disparities in those stops dramatically. And African-American drivers and motorists have had the biggest percentage reductions. But we did that working together with our community. And today, I know that that has built trust. And then come January of 2024, every law enforcement agency in Ramsey County will actually now start using the alternative, because instead of having to pull somebody over, we've created a way in which you can enter in that license plate and we can send out a notice, we can get you a voucher, a coupon to get your taillight fixed, or we will have financial assistance for your payment of that license tab. But that was a really hard conversation. When I first announced that back in September of 2021, I got a lot of criticism from a lot of people. And I remember the police union had some comment saying that that was a slap in the face to all victims. But we were committed to the research and the data. And I was committed to those conversations, those really hard ones, going right into these hard conversations and talking to people about why we needed to have a better version of public safety, why my office as a prosecutor, I felt I had a role, because I don't want to incentivize that police practice anymore. I don't want to be a part of it. I think there's legal reasons why it's legal, but that doesn't necessarily make it better for our community. And I'm so grateful that I have police chiefs, police leaders who have embraced that, and we're committed to the research, we're committed to the data, and we're going to show it again next year. And we're going to again show that our level of public safety is no different from anywhere else in America.
Representative Frazier, if you look at some of the news headlines, if you're a leader in public safety right now, it's challenging. What do you see as some of the more challenging aspects of someone being in a decision-making role in public safety?
I think it's getting above the narratives, the negative narratives that are always out there. How do you work above that? And I think what John talked about was part of it is continuing to have those conversations. We know we have on one side, folks really don't want to be engaged at all with law enforcement. But then on the other side of that, people want much more of law enforcement to be around, to see law enforcement, to feel safe. And so you have to keep having those conversations. And I have a lot of conversations with law enforcement with the roles that I'm in and the committees that I serve on and the legislation that I carry. And what I hear from all of the ones that I talk to is they also want the same thing. They got into the profession because they wanted to be able to keep communities safe. They got into the profession because they thought it was a noble thing to do, and they took those words to protect and to serve, they took them to heart. And what they also tell me is that, and if there's folks in our profession that are doing things that are denigrating that are destroying the integrity of our profession, we want those folks held accountable. And I think that is something that everyone needs to know. They are saying that. Folks that are police officers and law enforcement, police chiefs, the rank and file folks, they are saying that. They want their profession to be an upstanding profession. They want people to view it as an upstanding profession. And in large part, they agree with putting things in place to ensure that there's accountability, to ensure that that happens, that people can see the transparency, that people can see that people be held accountable if they violate what I call the sacred oath to protect and serve. So for me, those conversations and the continued conversations are vital to ensure that when we're working on anything, that we have the buy-in, or at least we have the input. We're not going to agree on everything, I know that. Some things we're moving at a pace that they may not want to move at. But ultimately, continued conversations will get us in a space that where I think we can move together to create a better system for everybody. And I think so my main thing is staying above the negative conversations, getting above those conversations, going through those negative conversations, and continuing to communicate and have conversations with folks. And I think that's the one thing the Law Enforcement Association can say. If they call me, I'll call them back. If they ask for a meeting, I'll meet with them. Well, we're going to have the conversations. They're going to be tough conversations, but we have to keep having the conversations because they are, in this current system, they are stakeholders. They're a big stakeholder in this conversation. And without us moving together and working together and trying to be as collaborative as possible, we're not going to get the modification and the reimagining that we need to happen in our system.
Let's talk about the last 3 years and what has been done since the murder of George Floyd in 2020. What are you seeing that is an improvement? You know, what policies or efforts from local or state governments have you seen that are examples of the right response? What's going right, John?
So I think none of this can just be done like we just say that we're going to do something differently. The truth is a lot of the change takes a really long time. So I've had a chance to talk a little bit about the non-public safety traffic stop work that we've done. A lot of the things that we have done were before George Floyd. We started this work a long time ago. One of the things I'm really, really proud of is how we think about how we help people and we understand how, as a society, we don't stop punishing people. Even after they have done everything that we've asked them to do, their period of probation, their sentence, the system that we have of collateral consequences and your inability to get access to housing, to jobs, is a real thing. And also, too, if you don't have United States citizenship status, there's another thing that's looming for you. You might be removed from this country if you have a certain type of felony record. And recognizing that the role of the prosecutor, it's not just about getting that conviction, it's about doing justice. And to recognize that it doesn't end after someone has been sentenced, but that we have a role to play to make sure that we're thinking about reentry, but also thinking about helping people get on with their lives, especially that population that has, again, done everything that we have asked them to do. So we have helpsealmyrecord.org, which is now statewide, but it started in Ramsey and Washington counties back in 2019. And we have mitigated collateral consequences for hundreds of people in Ramsey County. We don't talk about that very often because I want to protect those individuals, but in many of those instances, that mitigation that we did is saving them from actually being removed from this country. Because what they might have done a long time ago, 10 or 20 years ago, it might have been some felony damage to property, a drug conviction, right? Their punishment is actually double than somebody else who did the same thing 10 years ago. They probably would have gotten probation. This person actually, at some point, when the federal government comes knocking, they could be separated from their families and their communities. And that's a real thing that people are subjected to. And that's the role of the prosecutor and our justice system at the local level, recognizing that we should not just close our eyes and say, let's move on to the next case, that we have a responsibility to see people as people, and that we have, if we want the quality of justice to be strong, that our jobs cannot just end after we just process something, a case, but it's a human being.
And Representative Frazier, is there an example, something that stands out in the last 3 years that you're like, yep, see, that's good, we need more of that? Is there something that you have found to be effective, that it's a real change?
Well, almost immediately, because it's come up a couple of times, but restoring the vote for folks that have felony records is a big deal. That's a big deal. And it's a big deal because we know statistically, when John talked about following the data, statistically, folks that have the ability to vote and be engaged in that way in the democratic process are less likely to reoffend. They're less likely to go back into the incarceral state and back into the system. So that's a big deal. And another thing I think about is the way that we've now begun to focus on having mental health professionals as a part of our emergency response and as a part of our public safety system overall. And that's another thing I'll go back to. When I've done ride-alongs or I've had conversations with rank and file officers, they talk about being dispatched to calls where they feel woefully unprepared to engage with individuals that are having a mental health crisis, and how they would appreciate if they had
Acknowledge that.
They acknowledge that. They absolutely acknowledge that. And how they appreciate, as we're moving to a system that incorporates more mental health professionals into it, how they appreciate having someone there at least to guide them, or being able to send someone out that is prepared, that has been trained to deal with those situations. So those things, and it's going to take time to see how much it has an impact, but anecdotally, we're hearing things from folks that are saying how much it has an impact. And we're hearing from officers themselves saying things have been better knowing that we can send someone out that is trained to do that job, to respond to folks in a crisis, in a situation like that.
I'm encouraged by conversations, right? I mean, I'm a talk show host, so conversation is a big part of my life. But I'm not the only one. I mean, I'm talking about what you all are talking about, or what you all are telling you want to hear journalists talk about. And I think I'm encouraged by the fact that people are curious and they want to know what they can be doing, or understand why someone has an opinion that they do. And so I think that is a sign of some progress, that we're willing to voice what we're thinking and care about, right? As we think about the future and looking forward, in the 2024 legislative session, what do you see as something that you really want to prioritize? I asked the Lieutenant Governor that question, but as you return to your job in the House, what are you thinking about?
Well, for me, last session I got to carry some a gun safety bill, and it was the Extreme Risk Protection Order bill, known as red flags to most people here and around the state. And we got that put into place, which I truly believe is going to save lives. But it didn't. It's not the. To me, that is the baseline thing that we should have had in place a long time ago. We also closed the loopholes for background checks, things we should have had in place a long time ago. I believe they're going to save lives. They're going to help. But the gun violence that we see in some of our communities, not all of our communities, but in some of our communities in this state and around the country, there's other policies we need to put in place to effectuate change there. So I am working now on a gun safety package that will look at our policies and our laws and how we deal with that, to incentivize the reduction of gun violence in communities. And that's a big deal for me. So again, I come from my lived experiences. I came from a place where gun violence was rapid and prevalent. And that is something that had a huge impact on my life. And I know that in communities where it is impactful, that is why people feel really unsafe, knowing that there's so many guns in the community and that they can be touched by that type of trauma at any moment in their life. And so I'm looking at focusing on policies to reduce those and those times that it could happen.
But are you optimistic that you'll have support?
I'm feeling pretty good right now from the conversations we're having.
John, as we look at 2024, what would you like to see happen?
Well, one thing that I'm going to try to prioritize with the legislature and at the federal government is to continue some funding that we got from Congresswoman McCollum. Back in, I would say, February, March, April of 2021, we as a community, and that includes law enforcement and everybody that's part of the system, we were at our worst at actually doing the job of actually addressing some of the increase in crime that was happening in our community. What was happening is that we were all blaming each other. You know, the police were blaming prosecutors. Prosecutor could easily deflect to the judge, and city council members would say, well, go talk to the county, and nothing was really getting done. And we had, and we still do have, a violence problem, and there's many broad ways to tackle that, lots of different strategies, right? And Representative McCollum got us an appropriation of $900,000 to work on gun violence initiatives, to work with community and to fund them, to do violence interruption, but also to do some coordination. And that coordination has helped lead out something called the Violence Reduction Leadership Group, which we just get all the elected officials and the police chiefs in the same room and say, let's stop pointing fingers at each other and let's get to real solutions. That's how we had some really tough conversations around what we needed to do around our youth justice system and what judges were telling us about the lack of options that they had to deal with young kids that were, committing some very, very serious crimes. But we came up with a solution in Ramsey County. We figured that out. We also have now had some even more important conversations about how to address some of the gun violence. We're working better together. We're cooperating. And I think that's the secret sauce if we want to address some of the issues that are right in front of us. And we should not shy away from those those hard conversations. So we're going to seek to get some additional resources so that, because that money is going to run out. And what I want to do is I want to keep people talking to one another, people committed to finding solutions that we can all agree on. And there is so much that we can all agree on. We just need to find the courage, I think, actually, to agree with one another. That's the problem, I think, in American politics. Lots of people can't agree with the other side.
In your closing remarks, I would love it if you could speak really directly to the audience. For those of us who are not elected officials, who don't have law degrees, but care and really do share this common desire of safety and unity and just to be able to have some peace. What encouraging words can you leave us with, and what we can do to feel empowered and not hopeless? John?
Well, what I would say is this, and I think that one of the things in this country is that there isn't enough feeling of ownership of our systems, our criminal justice system. It all belongs to you. And so what I say is that more and more people pay attention to what's happening, the actual outcomes, and coming to this with some curiosity. You know, we can all have our own life experiences and our own wisdom, and we just think we know the answers. I think it's so important for all of us to have the humility to also understand that we might be wrong, and to listen to one another and think about the fact that historically many people in this country have not had a version of justice that they really want. And so if you're on the perspective of like there is justice in our community, this is how you get to safety, stop thinking that you have all the answers and listen to others. I think the same can be said for just a lot of things that are happening right now in our society. But if we can do that right, and we can work on the things that we can agree on and work together, and I know for a fact that we all want a better version of justice and we want more public safety. But how to get there, it really belongs to all of us, and it includes all of you. And so that's the key, I think.
And another way to describe you're wrong could be you're limited in your thinking, right? I mean, that's how I see it, right? Cedrick, what words of encouragement do you have for those of us who are just trying to get through the day and do no harm, but want to see everybody do well?
In the same vein as John, I mean, we live in a very, very connected world now, or we can be. We have a choice. We can either be very connected. Social media allows us to be more connected than we've ever been in our lives. Or you can use social media and you can be in kind of a echo chamber of folks that think just like you and not go outside that cycle. And what Angela just said about limiting yourself, that's how you limit yourself. And if you don't limit yourself, if you focus on expanding your knowledge, expanding the base of folks that you talk to, expanding your understanding of what's happening, not in the world, but just in your community, in different areas of your community, that's how we can be better for everyone else. I was out in the foyer before we came in. I was talking to Antonio and his family, and they were talking about how it's going to take the community to provide, to get to the point of real change and a real reimagining of our systems that we have in place that are creating inequities. And that is absolutely right, because without the community, I'm not up here and John's not up here. We don't have these titles. We don't have these roles without people putting us in these roles that said, hey, I like your values. They align with mine. I want to see something different. I'm going to elect you. And that's the power that you all have. That's the empowering thing. That's the power that each and every one of you have. You have the ability to put representatives in place in your community at the city council level, mayor, state level legislators, governor. You have the power to do that, to put people in places that share your values and want the same things that you want. And again, it's about that commonality, right? We all want safe communities. We all want good jobs. We all want good schools for our kids. You have to have conversations, find like-minded folks, open and expand your minds to folks that aren't in your circles, and then go out and use your voice as voters and put people in places to make the change that you want. You have the power to do that. That is your power. Use it.
Thank you. Our time is up. I want to thank our panelists again. We've been listening to a round of applause. Thank you to State Representative Cedrick Frazier, Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, and earlier Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Thank you guys for being a great audience.